Hey YouTube, welcome back to the Allegheny Northern, an N-scale layout. A request was made by one of the viewers to do a track plan video where I could show you all of the different track configurations. In one of my earlier videos, I mentioned that this was loosely based off the Salt Lake route, which was true at one point in time, but the layout has since expanded and sort of exploded, and it no longer resembles the Salt Lake route from Model Railroader at all. So I figured the easiest way to do that right now, rather than spend time drawing up graphics and all that sort of stuff that may not be interesting to everybody, is to actually walk the layout and show you how everything came together. So we're going to do that by following a train around the layout. That train is an intermodal train. It's a Norfolk Southern train that is in the Heartland yard, and that's this yard right here. As you can see, it is full capacity. Trucks are coming in, trucks are coming out. It has 5 tracks. They are stub-ended tracks, as you can see here, with the main line running above and behind it. That main line runs in what I call the Allegheny Cut. Back behind, there is a crossover, and that crossover services the town of Allegheny, which is the next stop once you pull out of the intermodal yard. The yard itself is an inland yard, so this receives truck to train traffic, and all traffic from this yard go to the port section of the layout, which is not built yet. So right now these trains are destinationless, so they don't get off the yard too often. There is a yard lead that our intermodal train is facing right now. So while our crew makes its pre-departure checklist and we wait for the yard master to give us approval to pull out onto the main, let's take a walk down the yard lead, and we will enter the town of Allegheny. So Allegheny has a passenger terminal that is visited by both Amtrak and commuter service, and most people that board in Allegheny are heading to the coal mines or to the yard shops. There is also a branch off of the number 2 main. So number 2 main is on the right there, number 1 is on the left, and that comes down to service this small yard here. The track to the left, immediate left of the station, is a maintenance of way track, so there's frequently equipment there. Sometimes there's cars and locomotives pending repair. There's a small repair service right there, small minutes away. They don't do nearly the level of work that the roundhouse does, but you'll see that here shortly. At the end, there is a industry. It's a printing company, and on this line it is serviced by box cars for paper products in and out, and also large gallon of ink come in by rail. It's probably more ink than a printing company actually uses, but it gives a reason to have tank cars spotted. There's also a crossover in this part of town, and that is useful for trains leaving the intermodal yard and needing to cross over to the number 2 main, and for switching activities in town here. And I do believe that our crew has gotten the green light from the yard master, so let's board the train and we will take off to the next city. Okay, our intermodal train has received permission from the yard master to pull out onto the number 1 main. So as we run along the yard lead here, we will join the number 1 main in the town of Allegheny. And we are currently looking east on the main line. Our train's next stop will be a location called Hidden Valley. It is the location of the town's power plant. The plant is coal-fired, receives coal from both Norfolk Southern and CSX. And as we pull out of Allegheny here, we enter the town of Hidden Valley. Hidden Valley is just that, it is hidden. It sits behind this ridge. It comes off the number 2 main, wraps through a natural carved stone tunnel portal, rounds a small pond, and then there are 3 tracks in the back, 2 storage holding tracks for cars coming in and outbound cars, and there is also a shed. That shed contains a rotary dumper that fires the coal power plant beyond. As our intermodal train continues to climb the 2% grade up towards Wintersdale, we'll stop back here and look at the Y. The Y branches off of the number 1 main in both directions and is the route's only access to the large terminal. Now, right now, the coal mine that's sitting there belongs on the upper layout. However, there's some plaster drying, so it's sitting down here today. The terminal, which is obviously being scratch built at the time, has 4 tracks that service both commuter and Amtrak. It does have a small escape track down to the turntable and the roundhouse. This is where surplus locomotives and large-scale repairs are done on both locomotives and on some freight cars. Right now, you can see that the yard is full. There are 2 tracks here that are also extra storage. They're full of locomotives right now, a lot of foreign power. This terminal is owned by Norfolk Southern, but you can see that they are not shy as to who they let in. The main line for this particular area spends a lot of its time underground. This is the parking lot or future parking lot of the terminal, and there is a fairly severe curve underneath that the main line follows. It does pop out on either side, obviously. Here there's a small yard. This yard represents areas where if the auto train can disembark and unload and reload passengers. The yard is designed for 3 tracks to store cars and 1 small pocket to hold a switching locomotive. It does have a small lead before returning back to the main line. And then, of course, rejoins in either the north or south direction back to the number 1 main. Here's another shot of the coal mine. I'm sorry, the power plant. And there is the rotary dump. Coming off the Y, the main line does an S-curve around an industry that's been here for the better part of 60 years. It is a small scrap company. Receives the majority of its material from rail service, and we'll see that here as we jump into town, where the tracks lead from behind the main line. There is the branch line that leads to the helix and ultimately the upper level, which is coal mines and intermodal port. There's a small yard which is largely empty today. This yard is typically full of coal cars bound either back for the mine or cars pending delivery to the power plant. Also, sometimes you will find cars here bound for the local industries, dropped off by manifest freights. It's accessed by the number 2 main line, and right below where the passenger terminal is, there is a crossover located right at the terminal. And as we travel down the main line here, there is a crossover right before the bridge, allowing switching activities to access both the yard, the main line, and the industries on both sides. Branching off the number 1 main is a branch line. This branch line services many industries. There are 3 bridges. One is a siding and passing siding that follow the main line for a bit before disappearing into the mountains here just west of Wintersdale and down to the quarry. The quarry is busy Monday through Friday. It services not only the Department of Transportation in both Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia, but also the railroads. So the limestone that's quarried here is of big importance. There is a crossover from the 2 branch lines so that switching activities can stay active while servicing the crusher. And then the small ore cars, which are being used in stone service, and the side dump cars and the rapid discharge hoppers are frequent on this line. As we follow the branch line back towards the main and the bridges, it does branch off and services the industrial district here in Wintersdale. There is a lot of industrial work here. There is a cement storage facility. Most of this material is delivered either by truck or rail. Some of the material is transferred to vehicles and used locally. Others, the material is taken off-site by rail. Additionally, there is an oil bituminous service here. Receives material by rail in storage tanks and then is offloaded for use in the production of asphalt and other oil-based activities. And then of course there is, at the end of the line, we have our scrapyard. 2 tracks there. It works on a loads in, empties out basis, where most of these other industries either receive traffic in both directions. This is one of the few that does not receive any empties, any loads going out. There's also a branch off here to a brewing company. The box cars that are typically spotted here have already been pulled by today's local, and they are outbound, loaded, and will be picked up by the manifest freight. Following a rather complex track network here and an interesting grade crossing, the train does do street running for just a bit before ending up at a furniture fabricator. They receive lumber, plywood by boxcar, flat car, center beam car, all types of different rail cars will deliver here. There's also an odd flat car from time to time with new woodworking equipment, and there is occasionally a tanker car that will be spotted outside for various greases and other sorts of type of material that may be delivered. There's a small yard office that services the terminal yard here, and with that, our intermodal train has received permission to continue along the number 1 main. Once we cross the river here, we are no longer in Wintersdale, and we head back into the reaches of the Allegheny Mountains, where winter has come early. The train disappears for a bit through a tunnel before rounding the curve and coming out on the far side. The entire layout is double track mainline, allowing traffic in both directions. This is helpful because in a lot of cases the towns don't necessarily have switch leads, and a lot of the switching is done on the main. This is a right-hand running layout, but you will from time to time, because of switching activities, see a train running left-handed. All traffic is controlled by central dispatch, and with the exception of the industrial areas, all switches are remote and controlled by the central control tower. Okay, if your train is bound for either the coal mines or the Northern Switching District and Port, you are going to come through the wall here located just off of Wintersdale. You will enter the helix and go through. Works out to about a 2.75% grade up to the hidden staging yard. The hidden staging yard contains 5 tracks that are considered storage, 1 track that is considered a main, and in this case I have made the main the shortest of all the storage tracks, which unfortunately for my locomotives means they need to bounce through all of the switches on both ladders. However, it does keep things more available for storage. There are 2 exit points. You can actually bypass the staging yard completely and head right up to the upper deck. Intermodal trains heading to the port terminal will do this unless they have a layover or a pickup in staging. Most trains, however, will continue through the yard and re-enter the layout's visible section through this northern port. Upon exiting the northern port, the trains have multiple options here as to where they can go. They can continue straight and run through to the mine section. And this is where my tipple would be if it wasn't sitting on top of the terminal at the moment. All of these tracks are full with coal cars, typically hoppers of various types. This mine is serviced by Norfolk Southern as far as bringing materials to it, but it is owned and switched by CSX. And there's some CSX power sitting waiting for the next train. I'm waiting for the tipple to come back as well. There's a small yard here at the end. This small yard holds inbound and outbound cars and provides a place to put cars while switching. And it is also the end of the mainline run. Trains can disappear, locomotives disappear in here for a time until it's time for them to return to pick up their train and head back to the coal mine. It's a sort of hidden staging that's really not designed for the full train, just the locomotive. This section of the layout is above the first section we looked at, above Heartland and Allegheny. But if you continued to hook to the left upon entering be above deck layout. You come to this small town. It's largely unclaimed at this point, sort of a no man's land. It's going to have several industries that have not been yet determined. So there's going to be one, possibly two there. There's going to be one back here. This is going to be a construction supply and lumber yard. So I've got a place for bulkhead flat cars, regular flat cars, box cars. I could even probably do some covered hoppers and some other things. So that's going to be a place to dump a lot of odds and ends as far as cars go. I could probably even justify some coiled steel being delivered there. And then finally I'll have a meat packing plant here, or some beverage distributor, something where I can drop off these pretty cool reefer cars. This area is switched by a Class 2 railroad, and so the motive power varies. I'm actually thinking about possibly doing a custom railroad for this area. Right now I've got a SD40-2 for the Wheeling and Lake Erie that's handling all of the switching duties for this area. There is an escape track that runs through town and runs out back down to the helix. And right now that line is out of service because I do not have the AR1 auto reverser attached to the track. So right now using this line causes a short. That AR1 has been ordered and will be in this week. And get that wired up for next weekend. And then of course that's the branch line that will lead to the port, and the port is going to occupy the upper section of the layout from right where you see the edge of what I'm calling the land bridge there. It will sit 2 foot off the wall and run all the way above the town of Wintersdale down to where the Allegheny Mountains start. That's a distance of approximately 10 feet, 12 feet if I can get it to clear those pine trees. So that section will be built here as soon as the weather is nice enough for me to go outside and actually do some woodworking, and then that'll be the winter project, getting all the track in place for that. One thing that's going to be cool about the port, I'm probably going to get about 5 or 6 storage tracks. I do want to put a ladder on both sides of the yard, and I am looking at current details for scratch building a modern container ship. You can find them online, and they'll send them to you as kits, but they're about $400 or $500. And I believe with a combination of shapeways and my own creative know-how, I can probably do it for a little better than that for what I need. So one thing that is a requirement for the port scene is I do want to show not only the boat, I do want to show the water line. I want to show the quay walls around all of the port, where the port ends and the ocean begins. So I have a pretty good list of things that I need to have in there, and I'll be anxious to see if I can get them all to fit in the space that I have available. So that's the full layout tour. That's everything that I can do right now. Everything is Digitrax. All the locomotives have Digitrax decoders where possible. There's a couple that have loc sound just because they were meant for it. And actually, believe it or not, the entire layout does run off of the Digitrax Zephyr Express. It was the intro set. I think it's rated at about 3.5 amps. And since for the most part I am a single operator, that means I can safely run 2 to 3 trains with 3 to 4 locomotives each on it, and I don't experience any power loss or distortion in the digital signal. So for now, that's sufficient. I do have plans to break it up into multiple power districts and add some boosters for future use, but right now, for what I'm doing, it's not necessary. If you have any questions about the layout, feel free to drop me a comment down below, and I'll do my best to answer your questions.